Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
What does it mean to lose your way? To be unsure of the path, of the very ground beneath your feet. To feel utterly alone, to wonder if this really is the end. Devastating forest fires, global unrest and polarization, human rights abuses on a grand scale, more calamity than one can possibly comprehend, let alone solve. So, now what? Maybe you despair, or argue, or deny, or practice self-care. Maybe you plan, maybe you prep, maybe you do your research. Or maybe you ask questions and demand answers. You hold leaders to account and speak truth to power. Maybe you remember that you're not alone at all. That in the worst of times you can look for the helpers, the people seeking solutions and practicing compassion. Maybe you remember that you can be a helper. We try to give, to listen, to make a difference. Thousands march and show solidarity. And millions of us make a choice every day to protect and support each other, even when it means being apart. We're still finding ways to connect, to have fun, to help, and to hope. And hope grows. Oh, it feeds on ideas, on innovation, and on understanding. Hope becomes a plan, which becomes a movement, which creates change. It's always darkest before the dawn. And times of massive upheaval have given us some of our greatest advancements. Lasting change comes when we realize our failures and vow not to repeat them. It's when we are on a precipice that we can learn how to fly. What does it mean to lose your way? What does it mean to find it?
Next, please. Please welcome to the stage your host for the evening, Chris Graham.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. How about another quick round of applause for that amazing video from Sandbox? Wasn't that fantastic? Yeah. Thank you so much, Boaz, and the entire team at Sandbox for all of the amazing work you do. So let's start by honoring the land upon which we are gathered. TEDxToronto is happening on land that has been a site of human activity for over 15,000 years. This land is the territory of the Anishinaabe Nation and was also the territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Neutral, and the Seneca Nations. Toronto has always been a trading center for First Nations and is governed by a treaty between the federal government of Canada and the Mississaugas of the New Credit. As we honor the stewards of this land, let us also recognize that we are all of us together responsible for taking care of this land. Thank you. And with that, welcome to TEDxToronto 2022. A warm welcome to all of you here in the audience and an equally warm welcome to all of you watching on the live stream. My name is Chris. I am one of the speaker coaches here at TEDxToronto, but tonight I am also your host. So that means it's my responsibility to support you in having a significant and memorable experience. To that end, let me start by telling you what's going to happen. I'm going to make these introductory remarks for about 3 more minutes, during which I would encourage you to find the optimum listening position. So turn off your phone, shift around your butt, negotiate the armrest, all that kind of stuff. After this little intro bit, I'll introduce the first speaker. They will give their talk. We'll have a brief Q&A on stage, real brief, and then we'll do the exact same thing for the second speaker, the third speaker, and the fourth speaker. All of that will take about 80 minutes, after which you are all invited out to the lobby for food, drinks, fun activations, and of course, lots of chatting. So that's what's going to happen tonight. Now let me tell you a bit about what exactly is this show. TEDxToronto was started in 2009 by just 2 volunteers. And to put that in perspective, the show you're about to see was produced by 70 volunteers, 70. We've come a long way since 2009 in the last 13 years, and our mission all along has been to shine a light on incredible stories and change makers from across the Greater Toronto region. We believe that ideas built in Toronto have the power to change the world. Our theme this year is Renew. The last 2 years have been tumultuous. And so, yeah, it's an understatement. And so what we want to offer with the show tonight is an opportunity for reflection on what we've been through and what we'd like to do differently. Our speakers on this evening, the first of 3, will focus on the specific ways we might renew the ways we care for ourselves and our communities. And speaking of those speakers, you might be wondering, how can I, sitting in the audience, support the people on stage? It's a great question. Our speakers tonight have been working on their talks for almost 4 months. True statement. Getting to this day is a remarkable journey, and for many of our speakers, you are the largest audience they will ever see, at least as a speaker. And so the best way for you to support the people on stage is with your laughter, your applause, and your keenest, warmest attention. Open your mind, and more importantly, your heart, and let's see what happens. And with that, I am so excited to introduce our first speaker, Tariq Fancy. Tariq's professional life is one long attempt to stitch together very disparate worlds. He's a Wall Street investor turned nonprofit founder and uniquely positioned to tell us all what's wrong with capitalism. Please welcome Tariq Fancy.
Purpose. For some, it's about finding meaning in your life and work. For me, it's about mayonnaise. That's right, mayo. See, in January, a fund manager and one of the largest shareholders in Unilever wrote an angry letter to the CEO complaining that the company's focus on purpose-related marketing was a distraction that was hurting profits. He wrote that a company that feels that it has to define the purpose of mayonnaise has, in our view, totally lost the plot. It's a classic Wall Street he said. On one hand, you have the CEO, whose lofty ambition is that the purpose of mayonnaise is fighting food waste. On the other hand, a rather dour investment manager who believes that the purpose of mayonnaise is salads and sandwiches. It's hard to say who's right, because these days, everything in business that used to be about profits is suddenly about purpose and sustainability and impact. You can't even find a job posting, particularly targeting young people, that doesn't talk about the social impact it creates. And yet, every single year, our experts tell us that our problems are getting worse, including climate change and inequality. So, if purpose is everywhere, why is it so hard to find? The answer lies in the economic systems that we rely on. To find more purpose in our work, we have to first fix the rules of the game. Today, too often, profit beats purpose because that's how the system was designed to operate. And it's something I know from the inside. My career was an odd journey across the purest extremes of profit and purpose. It began on the profit side. I became the youngest partner at a New York investment firm with a focus on what's called vulture or distressed investing. We would buy the debt of struggling companies at large discounts. Either the company recovers and pays us back, or it tips into bankruptcy, in which case we would fight against other stakeholders to take over the company and turn it around. It's pretty vicious stuff. But for some reason, at some point, I realized that where purpose meant trying to get a place in the Hamptons, it wasn't enough for me. And my change came through the example of a close friend, Michiel. When he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, he dropped his finance job and decided to focus on his own purpose. And while fighting stage 4 melanoma for 2.5 years, Michiel founded a charity for education in Kenya, where my parents were born and raised. Michiel and I shared a common desire while we were in business school to eventually find more meaning in our work. But his diagnosis meant that it was no longer someday. It was now or never. And watching his example sparked in me a process to find my own purpose that ended with me returning home to Toronto, moving into an apartment on top of a noodle house over on Baldwin Street, and deciding to plow my life and savings and all of my time and attention into creating a technology nonprofit, Rumi. Rumi's mission is inspired by the goal of helping anyone to realize their innate potential by making building new skills easy and engaging and fun. We figured out that we could leverage global volunteer networks to help us to create short, free micro courses that are optimized for mobile phones and are the same length as the average Instagram session, 6 minutes. Today, Rumi is used by people in over 200 countries and territories, including thousands of women and girls in Afghanistan who are learning from anywhere safely on their mobile phones in the local languages. In my new world, purpose was everywhere. It was a bit like the Unilever CEO's refrigerator. No one got that. Purpose was everywhere, but it felt a bit more real. And sort of at that time, I started to notice that the social trends, even as I found purpose, the broad social trends were going in the wrong direction. And that's when I was approached to help drive sustainable investing at BlackRock, the largest investment firm on the planet. Having worked on both extremes of profit and purpose, I was tapped to merge the two in an alluring new approach from Wall Street, where we get to keep making money and save the world at the same time. As it turns out, I think no one's going to be too surprised by this. In the end, it was a lot of profit, but the purpose bit was kind of felt like marketing. Most sustainable investment products are based on the flawed theory of divestment, or not owning the shares of, say, an oil company. The problem with applying cancel culture to financial markets is the same with applying it to ideas. You don't defeat something by pretending it's not there. The best way to think about competitive markets is that they're like competitive sports. Whether you're competing for profits or for points, these are well-regulated competitions where there are rules enforced by impartial referees. And what I saw was that in capitalism today, far too often it pays to be irresponsible. There's a reason that Facebook addicts us to their apps and Exxon pollutes. It makes money. And even to the extent that they incur fines, these are like parking tickets. I mean, the costs, the rewards of doing business in that way massively outweigh the costs. So I decided to leave the industry again. And I remember telling a friend that it felt like we were responding to a slow-moving cancer by giving the patient wheatgrass juice. It's well marketed in green, but it's not going to stop the disease. What would stop the disease? Well, in a competitive sport, when the game devolves into dirty play, we call in the refs to fix the rules. In capitalism, that would mean asking governments and regulators to use their special powers to fix the rules of the game for everyone. And therein lies the dangerous con of blindly equating profit with purpose, is that it's allowed business lobbies to argue that any government intervention in the economy, even to protect the public interest or the environment, is somehow this interference on a magical free market that will solve all our problems left to its own devices. Now, when an ex-banker tells you something is a con, you should probably listen. And the idea of saying that the government is interfering with the market or the free market makes about as much sense as saying that the NBA is interfering in a Raptors game by setting it up in the first place and hiring referees to enforce the rules. Capitalism exists because of the preconditions created by government, property rights, courts, similar structures that protect our shared interests and make business possible. It needs fixing, but it's ours. After I left the industry, I started to notice that they were ramping up their marketing around ESG and sustainable products. And after I worked on a study that showed that this was misleading the public and delaying overdue government reforms, I decided to speak out. I began writing publicly. I wrote a scathing essay entitled The Secret Diary of a Sustainable Investor that went viral and caused a bit of a stir. And I'm not going to lie, it felt kind of daunting to pick a fight with some of the most powerful people in the world. But I feel then, as I feel now, that there is a moral imperative, especially when the clock is ticking, to act quickly and act honestly. The point of the essay was that, first of all, people in the financial services industry either know this won't work or they're about to figure it out. Secondly, that any business leader that is out there claiming that we can create massive systemic change and address challenges like climate change through individual voluntary actions alone is not only acting irresponsibly at this point, they're lying. Just think of COVID. COVID was a systemic curve that science told us to flatten infections. Climate change is similar. It's a systemic curve that science is telling us to flatten emissions. It just moves a bit slower. And just as epidemiologists told us the government reforms we needed, many of them inconvenient, like closing schools, in order to flatten the infections curve, leading economists have told us for decades the kinds of government policy reforms we need in order to flatten the emissions curve. We just don't do them. Why? Because it's not profitable. Today, business leaders stand on stages and they claim to believe that climate science is real and that they want to fight inequality. And at the same time, their companies contribute to these problems. They use marketing to deceive us about the negative impacts of their business. And worst of all, many of them actively lobby and pay politicians to delay and scrap the kind of reforms that actually would address these problems. Put another way, they're paying the refs. This kind of duplicity lowers public faith in the system. Less faith in the system means less of an investment in fixing it. It's a vicious cycle. Younger folks today see a system that is not responding to the long-term challenges that they will eventually have to deal with. Today, there are two generations alive that no longer believe in capitalism, Gen Z and millennials. And can we really blame them? If every version of a sport that you see looks dirty and terrible, eventually you figure there's no way to fix this. It's a great idea from our business leaders if they believe that they want capitalism to go in the long term the way of toe wrestling. So I decided to speak out when I realized that 2/3 of Americans and 2/3 of Canadians believe that the system is rigged to benefit the richest and the powerful. They were looking for answers from insiders. And what I could see was this dangerous placebo that was doing nothing more than delaying, amplifying the cost of inaction, and transferring them to the youngest and the poorest in the world. So, working with partners, we launched a site, fixtherules.org, that uses the simplest form of learning possible, microlearning, to help people understand just how and why we need to fix the rules of the game. And it all comes down to, above all else, 3 main things. First, we cannot be fooled into believing that our individual actions alone can create the kind of systemic change required without also mandating that everyone, including large corporations, operate differently also. Second, we cannot be fooled into believing that our major power is as consumers. The kinds of broad-based systemic reforms we need mean that your power as voters and citizens is far more important because you can influence the laws of the land. How you vote matters much more than whether or not you decide to use a paper straw. And finally, we cannot be fooled into believing, into answering inconvenient truths with convenient fantasies. We've had a long enough time now to know that relying on profit-maximizing corporations to voluntarily forego profits and leave money on the table and out of the pursuit of the public interest is not working. And when relying on good sportsmanship doesn't work, it's time to call on the refs. We have to remember that our success will be determined not by the leaders, but by the laggards. So the latest new responsible brand or company won't do it. We need them all to be doing the right thing. But a note of optimism, if we work on this together and we fix the rules of the game properly once and for all, there's a chance of building a fairer system, a more accountable system, and one that actually respects the civil rights of the youngest and the poorest in the world. A brave new world where, above all else, all mayo has purpose. Thank you.
Congratulations, Tarek. Let's
Thank
slide
you.
over a little bit here. Different lighting treatment. So it's been a long 4 months preparing. Here we are on stage. How do you feel right now, man?
I feel great. I think that as pessimistic as the message I might have sounded, the truth is actually I think that we have a unique moment in history now, post-pandemic, to actually clarify narrative and start to make the kind of changes that might get us to where we need to go by 2030.
So if I wanted to run out of the auditorium and do that, what should I do? What would be my first step for you?
I think the most important thing to start with is that we actually start to clarify the narrative of what we need to do. There's this idea sometimes in social circles that you can do everything at the same time, but you can't. You have to pick and choose the levers that actually drive impact. Like, think of flattening the COVID curve. We didn't want, there's some guys saying horse tranquilizers, a political leader said drink bleach. We knew that there wasn't any of those things. It was a mask, it was vaccines. We let the scientists tell us what to do, and our experts are telling us what to do with climate and other things, and we just need to cut through the crap that is coming out of the marketing divisions of a lot of companies.
Yeah, this organized mind bespeaks a business training, I think. This is very excellent. So one thing TEDxToronto is a big community. We're really interested in community here, and it strikes me that 2 of the most courageous things you do was walk away from a community, once in the Wall Street community and then in the nonprofit community to go back. And so I wondered, what was that like? Like, first of all, what did your Wall Street trader friends say when you walked in? You were like, see ya, I'm gonna live in a dumpling house.
I mean, the hardest was when I first left. I remember there was a coworker who asked me to explain the same thing to him again in like the same words but slower, as if I was like a foreign language teacher teaching him a new dialect, because he couldn't compute. And I think the first time I did it was the hardest, but I think we all look at the heroes that we admire and follow in life, and whether it was my friend Michiel, who went in a certain direction, or the heroes I've always respected, they were bold enough to try to do the right thing at the right time. And I think that any of us, when put in that position, the time's right, will know.
We hope so, yeah. And just to push you on this, I'm so curious, when you went from the not-for-profit community back to Blackstone, like, you eventually came to realize, this is not going to work. But, like, were people telling you that before you left? Did they want you to stay? Like, what was that dynamic like?
You mean leaving nonprofit to go back to Wall Street?
Yeah.
I think it's wrong to assume that people who work in the industry are all in on some kind of a scheme. The truth is the majority of them think they're doing the right thing and they're trying the best. And so I have reserved my, let's call it scorn, for a few CEOs at the top who I know very well know how the system operates, and they know that this doesn't work, and it's not in their interest to say it. But the majority of the people working in the space, I couldn't cast aspersions on them for doing it because, listen, I drank the Kool-Aid once too. Sure.
I think this is what makes these sort of transitions or these problems intractable, because everybody has good intentions and can like see a path for their journey to lead to where they want. One other question I have before we let you go is, so we've been working on this for 4 months, and like, can you tell these people a little bit about your journey? Was there a particular challenge for you, or something that you thought was surprising, or something memorable from the last while?
The journey of preparing for this talk?
Yeah.
I think, one thing I think that I found, which is a treat for everyone, was the variety of the speakers. There's some really, really interesting themes and topics today. And so I'm looking forward to watching the rest. And that was one thing that was interesting, that it wasn't a bunch of boring ex-business guys like myself. It only gets better. But honestly, it was a really fun process working with the team and figuring out, the best way to tell an important message in a way that people, are looking for answers on and need to hear, and hopefully, the word spreads.
Well, you did a great job, man.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Yeah. One more time. Congratulations, Tariq. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks.
Well done. Thank you. I'm sure you all have lots more questions for Tariq than I was able to ask. He will be in the lobby after the show. I'd encourage you to go seek him out and chat. As you can see, a very generous and warm person, and I know he's excited to meet as many of you as possible. So before I introduce the second speaker, a question that we get a lot from people is there a way to go deeper into a speaker's world or their experience or their expertise than what is possible in the comparatively brief time they have on the stage? I know it doesn't always feel very brief, but it is very brief. And the answer is yes. It is the TEDx Adventures program. TEDx Adventures is an opportunity, regular-ish opportunity for members of the TEDx community, so that's all of you, to interact directly with some of our past speakers. Some fun opportunities coming up soon. May 26th, so this month, you could join a virtual discussion with Chenny Shah, CEO of Got Care, and to my mind, one of the most creative entrepreneurs in Toronto. On June 23rd, you could visit an actual urban farm with Ran Goel, CEO of Fresh City Farms. If you want to learn more about TEDx Adventures, you should join the TEDx email list or just follow any of our social channels and you will encounter all of the relevant announcements. But now, I'm so excited to introduce our next speaker. Kelly Boutsalis. We were so excited when Kelly agreed to be on the stage. Kelly's thoughtfulness, her integrity, and her energy are, as you're about to discover, singular. Kelly is the lead producer for CBC's Six Nations Bureau and an award-winning freelance journalist. She has published in so many places, it would take the length of her entire talk to list them all. Instead of doing that, I will invite you to join me in welcoming Kelly Boutsalis.
I packed up my things at the end of 2005 and left my home of Six Nations of the Grand River to go to journalism school in the big city of Toronto. And while I was a big reader of books, magazines, and newspapers, I didn't see stories that reflected those of my life, my friends, or my family anywhere. When I got to journalism school, well, I learned important things like how to identify what a story is and what it goes into putting together a newspaper or a magazine. We didn't talk about representation. We didn't talk about reporting in diverse communities. I wasn't given the tools to handle a story with care and sensitivity. We didn't talk about the damages of not having those things. A specific newscast made it clear to me that other journalists didn't have those tools either. It's something that I reflect on often of what not to do. It was a story about the land claim dispute between my community of 6 nations and the neighboring town of Caledonia. It was in an incredibly volatile time, and the non-Indigenous media was not helping. This newscast shook me. The reporter boiled it down to an issue between the natives versus the people. So what they were saying is that I'm not a person. The reason this impacted me so much is it encapsulates how I've been depicted my entire life. And this needs to change. It's 16 years later, and things aren't vastly better. When Indigenous people aren't in the newsrooms, stories about us often misses the mark. Even the New York Times missed the mark on a recent story about Inuit art. What could have been a celebration of the art turned into trauma porn. The headline, "Drawn from Poverty, Art was supposed to save Canada's Inuit. It hasn't." Just imagine how different this would have been if it was done by an Inuk journalist. But it wasn't. And this has repercussions. The media often shapes how we think collectively of an event, issue, or people. In this case, we're talking about an extremely varied group of people that are lumped into 3 categories: First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. Did you know that there are over 630 First Nations communities, 53 Inuit communities, and over 500,000 self-identified Métis people in this country? Don't forget, we're also the fastest growing population. So why are we not being properly represented? And why aren't we the ones telling our stories? This is something that I reflect on often, and it encouraged me to get into the media and try to change this. When the story is done right, like in Connie Walker's investigative trauma-informed podcasts, there is a richness to the story and a respect to the interview subjects. It enriches these stories. Thanks to the foundational work of journalists like Connie, it has enabled me to get into this space, and other Indigenous journalists like myself. The Native American Journalists Association exists today because of trailblazing journalists like Minnie Two Shoes, while today others have launched their own platforms like Indigenews, or their own production companies like Tanya Talaga's Makwa Creative. I have looked up to these incredible Indigenous journalists ever since I got into journalism, and even more so once I chose to dedicate my career entirely to telling Indigenous stories. I have had the pleasure of interviewing so many incredible and talented Indigenous people. And I also had the pleasure of interviewing both Connie Walker and Tanya Talaga. It blew me away that when I went to introduce myself to Tanya Talaga, she stopped me and said, "Kelly, we all know each other." She's right. We all do. There is a very small number of Indigenous people working in media today. A recent survey done by the Canadian Associations of Journalists on race and media showed that there are only around 175 Indigenous people working in Canada's newsrooms today. That's not a lot of people. And I actually know a lot of those journalists. I turn to them when I can't take on a story. When an editor comes to me and asks me to take on a story best handled by an Indigenous journalist, I often turn to that short list when I can't take it on myself, which is often. There is an appetite. The demand for our stories is real. The reason that I'm standing on this stage is because in 2017, I left my full-time job to devote my career entirely to telling Indigenous stories, and I went freelance. I also encourage other Indigenous people to get into the media today. I recently held a workshop back at my community of 6 nations, and I tried to give tools to the youth in the community to try to get them into this industry as well. I introduced them to other Indigenous journalists working in this field to pique their interest and show them that their stories are valuable, because they are, and there's not enough of us. I tell these stories to 2 audiences. The most important are other Indigenous people. I really want them to open up a magazine and see themselves in a place where they wouldn't normally see themselves, let alone in a positive light. But we're in this together. I also tell this story to non-Indigenous people so they get a sampling of stories that they have not been told so far. We are in this together. I want to see more Indigenous people working as editors and journalists across the nation. It would create collaboration. It would create inclusion. There would be stories on Indigenous accomplishments. It would humanize us. I'm asking you to call out stories told without care. Let's close this gap. Thank you.
Congratulations. We need to scoot right to the middle. Congratulations, Kelly.
Thank you.
That was fantastic. How do
you.
you feel right now?
I feel like I told only about half of my speech.
All the more reason for people to find you after the show to get like,
Exactly.
yes,
Yes,
the
there's
extra-
more.
So thinking back to when you first got into being a journalist, what was the first ever story that you worked on?
The very, very first story was from my own community newspaper, and it was probably on a lacrosse game or something similarly small. But once I dedicated my actual career to telling Indigenous stories, I told a story of a program called Connected North, which connects students from up north and how they could access educational resources in the south.
Fantastic. Do you have like a copy of it like taped to your fridge or something to commemorate the first? No? Okay, fair enough.
I don't. It was online.
Onward. Journalism is a high churn business. Writing freelance. I also have some friends who write freelance, and I'm always struck by the enormous creative freedom that at least in theory provides. So you can write about almost anything you want, which seems both thrilling and daunting. So can you share with us, how do you go about deciding what it is that you're going to spend your time on?
Honestly, it's something that interests me. If I can find a way in and know that it's going to be an interesting story and I'm going to learn something and I'm going to talk to someone passionate about it, I think that there's value in that, and I think there's value to the eventual readers of the piece. But sometimes it's just, honestly, I find stories on Instagram. I'm like, everybody's posting about this, let me check it out. And then I wind up telling a story that no one else has told yet.
That's very cool. When you say, if I can find a way in, I feel like that has a particular meaning for a journalist. Can you, or maybe not, but what does that mean?
Yeah, it is when I can find, how do I interest myself in this subject? Because a lot of the times I'm talking to people who are so knowledgeable and they're so passionate. But if you find something, a nugget that's interesting that you don't see spoken about or you don't see in other publications, that's the way in.
That's so interesting. It sounds like it requires quite a bit of discernment, both for yourself and for the story. Is that fair?
think so. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and I feel like it just comes naturally at this point of, oh, this is interesting, I'm going to follow that. And it's being curious is another part of it.
Yeah. Notwithstanding you've been doing this for a long time, you said, you often talk to people who are very knowledgeable and very passionate. Do you ever get intimidated?
Yes, I do. And it's not about CEOs anymore. It used to be, but now it's...
Tarek.
Sorry, Tariq. But now it's people who I'm a fan of, and they could be anything from like an art critic to somebody who's super knowledgeable about perfume. It could be just somebody who's captured my interest, and I just become a fan of theirs.
That's very cool. Somebody please, after the show, ask about the perfume story. That sounds very good.
It's not out yet, so.
Okay, one other question I wanted to ask, again, about the process. So everybody's seeing you here for the first time, but of course we have been seeing you for months. As a person who writes professionally, how was this talk writing process for you? Was it different? Was it similar?
The beginning was similar, so I just sketched out with my wonderful coach what I was going to talk about, and then we worked on it together. So it was like we were editing together. We had like a writer-editor relationship. And then once we got to the performance part, it was completely out of my wheelhouse, and that was the part that I stressed on for those last 2 months.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, we're so glad you came to join us here today.
Thank you.
did fantastic. One more time, congratulations, Kelly and Sally. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I also want to say a quick thank you to all of you in the audience. You're doing amazing. You are so engaged, you are so attentive, so supportive. I can feel it on stage, and I know all of our speakers can too. So thank you so much for what you're doing. And now, I am so thrilled to introduce our third speaker, Chandra Maracle. Chandra is one of the most profound people that I've ever met. She is an incredible combination of wisdom and novelty and deep, deep feeling. Chandra is the founder of Real People Eat Real Food, where she explores the links between people and food and all of the things that people with food try and do. Please welcome Chandra Maracle.
Thank you. You must not know too many people, Chris. I admit, I was scared. I didn't know much about babies. And even though she was consciously conceived, things don't always go as planned. Sure enough, about halfway into the pregnancy, we learned that my oldest daughter, Kira, had a congenital heart defect and would require immediate medical attention after birth. At 2 weeks old, she had her first open heart surgery. It didn't go well. They had to do it again. Sounds devastating, right? To be honest, I was okay. I had pillars for parents, and we were at one of the best children's hospitals on the planet, just up the road. Community care and support were endless. Tobacco was burned for us. A jingle dress dance was done in her honor. A benefit fundraiser was held for us at the Fort Erie Native Friendship Center. I don't remember hearing about postpartum anything. I didn't need it. I was fine. Community care, feeding people, sharing food. That's what I do. For 30 years, I've been feeding people and educating people about healthy food and nutrition, often with a special focus on feeding children. But it wasn't until after having 5 children of my own that I learned how important it is to feed moms. Sometime after Kira's 3rd open heart surgery, my son Aiden was born in hospital with unexplainable neurological issues. The prognosis was not good. After only 1 month, I couldn't even pump enough breast milk to feed him through a tube. I couldn't eat. Liquid meals in a can kept me going through the motions. Sounds devastating, right? It was. But again, family, community, our midwives, doctors, nurses, home support workers kept the care and support coming. As I held my 18-month-old son in my arms and watched him take his last breath, I thanked him for letting me be his mom. And I told him it was okay to go. It was his time, and it was okay. Rachel Garcia Saliga, founder of Innate Traditions Postpartum Care, tells us that an awareness of grief can sometimes surface for the first time in the initial postpartum period. It can feel so hard, she says, like something is missing. What's missing, she says, is community. And when we acknowledge the destruction of our communities, we acknowledge ancestral grief. Feeding people, community care, sharing food, these were once the norm in Lodinu Shuni, or Six Nations communities. In a traditional longhouse village, no one was hungry, no one was homeless. Women were in charge of food production and their bodies. Colonial and medicalized practices have caused destruction in our communities. But we can re-relate by remembering how to take care of each other again, the way we were biologically intended. Fast forward a few years, and my daughter Olivia was born in her great-grandmother's house. Friends and family came and shared food and celebrated with us our joy and our relief. Agwegonscana. We were all at peace. 5 years later, we did it again. Another baby girl, Francesca, Franny, born at home. I now had 3 kids, and I was away from my immediate family. My father and my grandmother had both died the year before. I had plenty of friends, but they were all moms with as many or more kids than I had. Another 5 years later, 7 years ago, at 42 years old, I gave birth at home to my daughter, Violet. I had planned and prepared everything. It was perfect. And then something happened. Nothing happened. I was physically broken, mentally exhausted, emotionally drained. How could no one see this? Why didn't I say anything? Because I'm Superwoman. Truth is, we're all superwomen, but at what expense? As moms, we're conditioned to think we need to do it all, be all things to all people all the time. Birth without fear like real women. Grow the corn, then cook it into soup. Learn an endangered language, then teach it to your kids. I don't know any moms who haven't experienced some level of postpartum depletion. Now imagine if you've heard anything about postpartum anything, it's postpartum depression. This is a huge disservice. It makes us think that something is wrong with the mother. It takes her out of the whole family and community constellation. In my own words, in my own opinion, it should be called postpartum community care deficit disorder. See, from my own experiences, I think we can handle almost anything if we have enough love and support around us. Without it, even caring for a beautiful, precious, but screaming baby at 3 a.m. can be too much to bear. Even though all humans come to the world in the same way, we seem to have forgotten some basic knowledge about how to support this process. In order to ensure the vital repair of bodies, after the rigorous work of pregnancy, labor, and delivery, a few essential things should happen. First of all, moms must be allowed to rest, and moms must be allowed to rest so that her body can heal properly and naturally, particularly in the pelvic floor. Mom should be kept warm, especially in the core, so that her uterus can go back into place. Mom should be fed warm, nutrient-dense, easy-to-digest foods that she did not have to prepare herself. To restore her body and so that she could have enough energy to feed another human with her body. Moms are so amazing, aren't they? Perhaps the least understood aspect of postpartum care is the need for moms to have community support and social engagement. These are necessary so that mom has a sense of safety and security and to support her process of becoming a mother. In Ganyangeha, the Mohawk language, children can be referred to as the Dahadigun Sundunje, the new faces that are coming toward us from out of the ground. That ground is Yetini Sta Ohunja, our mother, the earth. As women, we are the embodiment of Mother Earth. Our bodies reflect the vulnerability of the planet. The health of women and the health of the environment need to improve. We know this. But this is where we can start, right at the beginning, right at the juncture where humanity and motherhood meet. Feeding and nourishing women who just brought new life to the planet. And by extension, their babies, their families, and their futures. Isn't about being nice, and it's not about giving or getting free food, and it's more than community care. It's preventive health care. Born as human beings, we were all once part of a postpartum experience. Every single one of us. As part of a human family and community now, how do you see yourself reflected in the postpartum mirror? I'm Chandra Maracle, and if you didn't already know, now you know.
Well done, Chandra. I think we're going to have you duck off while we set up the stage, and then we'll bring you back on. Okay. Yeah, perfect. Don't despair, Chandra's not going away for long. We have a special feature coming up, which is a fireside chat between Chandra, organized by with Chandra, organized by one of our partners. It's basically an extended Q&A where we're going to get to dive in a little bit and learn a bit more about the talk. But while they're setting up the stage, I thought I would just take a quick inventory of who's here tonight. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all the way in the back. Can we clap if you're from Scarborough? Is anybody in from Scarborough? Hey! It's like you're sitting in Scarborough. Oh my God. I'm also from Scarborough, so I'm glad to have some Scarborough folks tonight. Is anybody in from Mississauga tonight? Hey, amazing. The Scarborough of the West. Is anybody, how many people are in from Toronto, like downtown? Is that everybody? Amazing. And is anybody in from like Hamilton? Do we have anybody in from? Amazing, we have one person from Hamilton. And what about, did anybody like bike here today? Did you brave it on the bike? But the hands are up but not clapping, so I don't know if that counts or what. Amazing, people are biking, that's great. Anybody take the TTC? Are we right on? Awesome, okay, time has been filled. You all did great. So I said at the beginning of the evening that TEDxToronto is a volunteer organization, and this event is underwritten by a vast quantity of volunteer labor, as well as the financial support of a handful of very special partners, one of which is the YMCA of Greater Toronto. So please join me in welcoming to the stage from the YMCA, Jameson Stevie, and back to the stage, Chandra Maracle.
Okay.
Perfect. So we'll have you in the middle, Chandra, if that's okay.
Ooh, okay.
And Stevie, perhaps on the other side. Mr.
Sure.
Stevie, thank you.
Well, so I get to interview one of the most profound people Chris has ever met. So that's not intimidating at all. So my name is Jameson Stevie. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at the YMCA for the Greater Toronto Area. We're so pleased to be a sponsor tonight, largely because the Y is all about building community. We nourish the community in a number of different ways. We're the largest not-for-profit childcare provider. We do swim and gym, as we were talking earlier, and helping people with their mental and physical health, connecting seniors through the Bright Spot, which is an online portal. But when you walk into our YMCAs, you see all ages and stages of community. And we were talking about how at the Y, we try to help people through their transitions, and I was so inspired by your speech. I also missed my mom a ton by the end of that. One of the things you said, obviously, that struck me was postpartum community care deficit disorder. Really intrigued by that term and wanted to know more about, in the experiences when you felt that community support, what were some of the things that were specifics that were done that helped you feel that envelopment of love around you?
Yeah. Not surprisingly, they involved food. So, for example, when Kira was born and we were up here at Sick Kids, the hospital social worker gave me endless vouchers for the food court. When my son, Aiden, was in the hospital in Hamilton at Mac, and I was kind of living at the Ronald McDonald House for a while, when I returned back there one day, one of my midwives was standing outside just waiting to hand me like 3 bags of groceries. And turns out she was a student midwife who is now the director of the birthing center, because it's been about 22 years or something. So I mean, those are two, specific, but then the ones that I mentioned, just, the outpouring of stuff that people did for us. And then once we brought Kira home, for example, there was just, I had so much family and community, like we were at the Native Center like all the time, and people were just always around, and friends and family came to the house all the time. And, even if they didn't bring food, my friend Barb showed up one day and took all my laundry to the laundromat for me, So there's just those little things that you think are little, but they're huge.
Yeah. And we were talking upstairs, a pro tip, it's okay to bring good food.
Yeah.
Not just casseroles of lasagna and cookies. We have other options when these things happen.
Preferably, there's only so many like cream donuts you can,
We were also talking about, one of the last celebrations of community that this city had was the Raptors Parade. And we talked about the notion of, as great as an accomplishment as that is, perhaps 12 to 15 men competing for an NBA championship isn't as miraculous as creating life. did you wanted to talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to talk about that because if you had known me, prior to having children, that's kind of all people knew me for was being an athlete. And so after having children, I likened it to, being a mom is its own form of athleticism. So there is, for example, 9 or 10 months of training, and then you have, before the big game or the big tournament, depending on how long your labor goes. And so really I felt these comparisons because, I always wanted to be a professional athlete, so I guess I kind of accomplished that. And I think, wouldn't it be wonderful if we paid moms as much as we pay professional athletes? Not to take anything away from them, just give us some too. So yeah, I think when you really think about it, we spend a lot of time caring for athletes, after Wimbledon, right? After the Stanley Cup, after the World Series. The athletes are treated rather well. I'm sure to good food, I'm sure to massage. That's actually one thing I didn't mention about postpartum care. Moms really should have some body work done. So I do think that it would be nice if we were to treat, moms immediately after all of this training, all of this work of labor and transition, and then into the delivery itself. And then I think you mentioned before, 2 days later they send you home, unless you're already home. And if you're already home, then everybody kind of disperses a couple days later, and you're still just there, And so I guess that's a good lead into what was so different between the first two, where I had ridiculous circumstances with my first two, that by the time I got to my fifth, everybody just thought, Chandra, she's old news, she's fine. And I wasn't fine, and I didn't even really realize it to myself until 2 years ago when Rachel Garcia Saliga found me on Facebook, and I thought, well, why would I take a postpartum care course? I'm not having any more kids for sure, and my youngest was 5 at the time. And then it just kept gnawing at me, and I took this course, and I could not believe that I've had 5 children, and I did not know all the stuff that we all need to know about caring for postpartum moms.
You're a 5-time champion, I think, in my
trophies.
In my books.
Yes.
So yeah.
Although I'd rather have a plate from Wimbledon, but it's okay.
But it is for any of the parents in the audience, the most intimidating moment is when you're leaving the hospital or wherever you have given birth, and they just let you leave with the child, and there's
insane.
It's
totally
insane. That no one told me that now it's all up to us. So what can we as a broader community do to recognize and assist new parents and new moms?
Yeah, so I want to be really practical here. So one thing, if you're at all drawn to this, I would highly recommend that somebody in your realm take the innate postpartum traditions care training. But also, because I focus on food, I was thinking of specific food examples, and I thought, you know what? We have a lot of infrastructure already. We've had Chinese takeout for a long time. We've had the McDonald's drive-through window for a long time. So if we take those concepts, and just, maybe I should have mentioned that company by name, I don't know. But anyway, you all know what I mean. So we've had that for a while, and now, with COVID, everybody has upped their takeout game so much, and we have DoorDash and Skip the Dishes, and in my community where I live at Six Nations, we had porch pickup. We kind of been doing porch pickup since before takeout was a thing. But anyway, so we have this infrastructure of where we could just put our heads together a tiny bit more and figure out, how do we shuttle food from one place to mom's door? It's really not that it's not that hard, right? And I think after you've had 5 kids, or when you're almost 50 years old, everything seems a lot easier than it used to, And so a lot of these things, we don't need to overthink them. We just need to put our hands in. Sometimes we're so up here in our heads, and that's okay, but like to bring it down, to feel it, and then just really put it in our hands. And if you know somebody that is having a baby, whether you're related to them or not, that whole family needs to be supported. Right. It's not just mom. So I want to highlight mom and I want to celebrate mom, but at the same time, I want everybody to understand that it isn't just about mom. Every single one of us. That's why I said it. Said that. You can see yourself in there somewhere, because even if you don't ever want to have a baby or whatever it is, like somebody in your universe is going to have one sometime. And even if you're like, here you go, here's a gift card, let somebody deliver food to your door. I was really serious about that in that initial time, that mom should be fed those foods and not have to cook them herself. Yeah. And that was a mistake that I made. In my last one, I talked about with Violet how I planned everything. I didn't have to leave my house for 7 weeks. But I didn't know that, I'm the cook in my house. Mm-hmm. So like when everybody else was at school and work and I'm just home alone with baby, I had to do all that stuff myself, so I didn't know all that then. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and if you've ordered too much DoorDash, there's a YMCA near you. Join. There's lots of things to do at the Ys. The last question is, I was really taken as well by your notion of preventative healthcare. I mean, if there's anything we've learned in the last couple of years, it's public health measures to avoid things are probably better than trying to react to them afterwards. So what advice would you give for individuals, organizations, as we think about preventative care? And you talk about before, during, and after birth. Can that be extrapolated out to other services or other aspects of the community?
Oh, I think so, for sure. So, that was one of the things that drove me crazy about COVID in the beginning, was nobody was ever just talking about, how to keep yourself healthy and not get this, or if you do, mitigate it. And it's the same thing. Preventative healthcare is always the same. It's about getting yourself healthy and keeping yourself healthy. And that is a community effort, my friend. Like when you try to do that by yourself, it's not nearly, as effective as when you're doing it in community. So, I always come back to food, I guess. And, certainly food is your best bet for preventive health care. I mean, we can talk about this for everyone. We can talk about this specifically for would-be moms, and their families. But it's a really good time. Usually when women get pregnant is the first time they start thinking about, oh, yeah, maybe I should think about what I'm eating, or maybe I should think about being a little bit healthier. And that's great. If that's what baby brings to you, that's wonderful. I don't know. I think as a community, everybody could just be a little bit more conscious about when you have events where food is going to be served. I don't know what's on the tables outside, but that's what I mean. I mean, I've been to conferences talking about good food, and they don't serve good food. Right. Like, we have to stop doing that. We have to stop wasting money on bags of plastic garbage, calling them swag bags, and just put the money into good food. So always put your dollars into good food when you can, and let people feel that love instead of, like, I don't know, stuffed animal or something. So.
Well, listen, thank you for inviting us to be part of your community, and really inspiring and thoughtful words. So thank you. Appreciate
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Chandra.
Thank you.
Yeah, after you.
Congratulations, Chandra. Thank you.
So much.
Thanks, Jameson. Amazing. So before we head on to our final speaker, I want to say one more quick note about partnerships. The financial support of institutions like the YMCA is instrumental to our ability to put on this show. So if you're sitting in the audience and you're thinking, next year, I want to be sitting where Jameson was just sitting, please send us an email. We would love to help you out. Also, if you're watching the live stream right now, which feed is the live stream feed? Is it this one? Let's say it's this one. If you're watching the live stream right now, and next year you're thinking to yourself, I want to pay for this live stream, send us an email. We would love to make your dream come true. Amazing. All right, and now I am so delighted to introduce our final speaker. People often wonder, how do we select the speakers that get to be on the stage? And one way is through a curation process. So the coaches, myself, and about 10 other folks fan out across the city, and we research interesting and topical ideas, and we debate them and see who might be a good person to have on the stage. But the other thing we do is have a community nomination process. Anyone, anywhere, can nominate themselves or another person to be on the stage. This year, we had over 700 nominations, one of which is the man you're about to meet, Andre Gibson. Andre is, without question, one of the most creative people we've ever had on the stage. As you're about to see, I should say here, his particular kind of creativity is at once subtle and complex, and so too is his thinking about the world and his journey through it. Please welcome Andre Gibson. He has it.
Come home before dark. My mom would tell me. One night after middle school, the sun had set, and it took a search group to find me, only playing basketball with my friends and kids from around the neighborhood. I just couldn't stop playing. Basketball, my first passion. But sometimes I just couldn't play. My basketball would get taken from me, stolen, run over by a car. I couldn't afford to buy a new one. The nets at school would be taken down for repairs and not put back up for some reason. And sometimes I went on someone's driveway without asking permission that had a basketball net to play on it. I got scared that the cops would get called on me, afraid that I would get yelled at. It was my passion, my only passion. And I just couldn't play. Quickly, my passion and escape turned from a source of safety to me feeling trapped. That was my first passion. And it only got worse when I found out in high school I would be going to a different high school for my first year than the kids that I grew up with from around the neighborhood. They were my friends. I went to middle school with them. They knew me, they knew the real me, and I felt safe talking to them, to be myself. They knew my funny, quirky side. But I lost my confidence, my passion, my love and escape, and my social anxiety only got worse. In that transition in high school, from middle school to high school, I remember people by their shoes, always looking down. I couldn't look up even if they were talking to me. I couldn't look up to say hi. I remember the ground and the concrete, because I didn't have the confidence to look up, wondering what they thought about me. My social anxiety was only escalating. In grade 9, I was in a computer lab one day at lunch, and I saw someone. I didn't know them. A few computers away from me, they were playing the first video game that I ever played, Banjo-Kazooie. I wanted to ask them if they were on the first level, Spiral Mountain, or the last level, TikTok Woods. I sat there for the whole 30-minute break, unable to say anything. I remember the clock ticking, and I couldn't say anything. The whole 30-minute break, each tick of the clock, I felt my heart clenching and my lungs. I couldn't breathe, and I experienced that for the whole 30 minutes. And then the bell rang, and I watched them get up and walk away. I never got to say a word. But soon enough came an opportunity for me to rebuild my confidence and crush my social anxiety and rebuild my passion. In grade 9, I was on a field trip, and we were walking in single file line, and from a few students ahead of me, I heard I was like, wow, what was that? So I walked up to him and I asked him, hey, can you teach me? And he said, this is beatbox, and no. So I went home that night after school, remembering what I heard. I heard sounds found in common speech, like the letters B, T, and K, and I heard tongue clicks. All these things I've done before. All these things I know everyone has done before. When I heard him do all of that, what you just heard, I knew I could do too. So I went home and I tried, came back to school the next day, and showed him my style, my version. That started our rivalry for the next 4 years. Beatbox and the basics of beatbox can be found in the drum kit and the 3 letters BTK. The drum kit, 3 main sounds: the kick drum, the hi-hat, and the snare. Everyone can beatbox, and I'm going to explain to you how. The letters B, T, and K, we remove the vowels. So E and A. B becomes P, T becomes T, and K becomes K. But with beatbox, it's not only limited to the drum kit. In grade 9, I played an actual trombone. I was the top student in my class, studying sheet music at home that was assigned to me, but I was also studying sheet music that wasn't assigned to me, that I Google searched from TV shows and movies of my favorite times. I remember searching Ghostbusters sheet music. Doug. Angry Beavers. Thanks to beatbox, I could make my instrument play a clean sound. To do so on a trombone, you need to know what lip oscillation is. And you also need to know what note accenting is. And thanks to beatbox, I could already do those. But talent and passion and love wasn't enough. To afford an instrument, you need money. The school will let you buy an instrument, but if you couldn't do that, they'll let you rent it. And I couldn't even afford that. At home, I was living without running water. At home, I was living without running water. The school didn't have space for a kid who couldn't afford water. I was living without running water, brushing my teeth from a bucket that we filled up from my neighbor's hose. They didn't have space for a kid who couldn't afford water, let alone instrument rental fees. I still remember my music teacher's face when I told her. She was angry at first. She's like, "You were one of the best students in the class. Why didn't you sign up for the next semester?" And I told her there wasn't enough space. That's what they told me, no exceptions. So, soon enough though, came an opportunity for me to rebuild my connection and passion to music. Out of 100 students in my high school that auditioned for the school talent show, a handful were chosen. And one of them was me. On that stage, I didn't need my trombone. I didn't have my basketball. I didn't need to find the right words to express myself. I just needed my mouth. I remembered all the sounds I've ever done and put them in a rhythm, turning noise to music, and I layered them. Not everyone is a professional musician. Not everyone is a professional percussionist. Not everyone is a professional singer. But I'm sure all of you have tried to sing before. I'm sure all of you have hummed a melody stuck in your head or whistled it, or tapped the rhythm out with your foot or with a pen on the table. I'm sure all of you have clicked your teeth or bit your tongue when you're nervous. The urge for me to beatbox is similar to that. Not everyone is a professional. But lucky for me, beatbox has allowed me to travel the world and teach beatbox and share my craft with those who also beatbox and with those that it can help. In 2017, I auditioned for the Canadian Beatbox National Championship. I became the Vice Canadian Champion, placed second. 2019, I became the Montreal Beatbox Champion. With beatbox, you don't need to find the right words to express yourself. And this reminds me of a story. In 2019, I had the opportunity to teach beatbox in a homeless shelter for children. There was one student in my workshop class. I was with them for 2 months, the whole class. And she reminded me of me at a young age. She couldn't find the words to express herself. In that class, one day we had a roll call, and everyone had to say their name. And when it was her turn to say her name, she couldn't. And the other kids beside her said her name for her. She couldn't find the right words to express herself. She couldn't even say her own name. In that class, one day I suggested, let's play a game where we take a beat. It's just 3 sounds in a rhythm. And then we make a circle, and everyone takes one sound of the beat and keeps the beat going as a group. And we have to keep it going so it sounds the same as the original beat. She didn't want to play, though, but eventually we convinced her to play. And if you mess up the rhythm, you're out. This way, we can keep the beat going and hear what it's really supposed to sound like. She joined the game, and she was the last one in the finals, and she won the game. And every class, she won the game, and she won the game over and over again. She didn't need to find any words to express herself. With beatboxing, you don't need any words. You don't need instrument rental fees to cover. You don't need money. You don't need a basketball. You don't need a net. All you need is a love for music and the need to express yourself. Beatboxing is not noise. Clicking your teeth. The next time you have a nervous tic and you find yourself clicking your teeth, just click it in a rhythm. Sounds in a rhythm. And add the B, T, and K that I taught you earlier. And eventually you'll get to that level. Next time you're at a birthday party, instead of singing, be the one to lay down a beat while the rest of them sing. Beatboxing is like a quote from the founder of beatbox, Dougie Fresh. We have done so much with so little for so long that we are now qualified and capable of creating anything out of nothing. Thank you.
Let's stay in the middle here for a second, Andre. Is that the beatbox one or the? Okay, you got to talk into it though, so they can hear you.
Check, check.
Look at this, me giving tips to the mic guy. So, congratulations. How do you feel right now, man?
I feel good. It's a bit more emotional than I thought it would be.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's funny, one of the nice things about being a coach is that you get to stand behind the stage and know what's about to happen. So I was able to watch all of you from backstage see and react when you, Andre, started making noise for the first time, beatboxing. It was absolutely incredible. So a question I have, and maybe this is a silly question, but like, what's the hardest beatbox sound you've ever had to learn or that you like continue to try and make? Into the mic. Yeah, of course, yeah. I feel outgunned here in a big way.
So the hardest sound that I like continue to learn, it's so there's a sound called the lip roll.
Uh-huh.
And when I first heard that sound, I was like, whoa, like, what is this? And at that point, like, I was already beatboxing for like 5 years. And it's, by definition, is like what we say, like rolling your R's. The lip roll, you roll a pop sound, which is, but rolled sounds like. So I was like, how do you do that? So eventually, I'm like, it took me 4 months. Like, I kept trying every day, and I didn't even do one for 4 months. And then after 4 months, I finally did one. I'm like, okay. But then I didn't stop there, and I was like, okay, laser lip roll. Like, I wanted to make new variations. I wanted to think of all the sounds that I've done and make new sounds. And I thought of there's a sound I do, like, I've never used it in a beat because it looks weird. You suck on your tongue. I'm like, okay, like, I'm never going to use that. But then, okay, I thought, okay, let me be creative and combine that with the lip roll. And like, okay, it's getting somewhere. And then I combined it with a more punchy sound. And then with the lip roll, I invented something that I call the laser lip roll, which is now used by thousands of beatboxers around the world.
Something else, I'm not sure if this carries into the audience, but this stage actually vibrates when he does that. Yeah, okay, you can feel it. Okay, yeah, it's not the subway that time. So I'm sure some people are wondering, where do you find, do people find beatboxing? Like, do you release albums? Is this on Spotify? Like, where does the community hang out, publish? What's the word for that? Like, where does it exist?
So the beatbox community it's really intimate, but really large at the same time.
Uh-huh.
So, like, imagine, like, you really love beatbox. So you're part of the community because you love it.
That's really nice.
But at the same time, imagine, like, what you're doing. Like, you're going on YouTube and Google, you're typing beatbox, and you're going through every video, every page. Like, you're eventually going to see every beatboxer in the world. Like, that's just...
So it's a YouTube basically. Mostly it's on YouTube. If you want to hear more like Andre, it's search you on YouTube would be the way to do that.
If you want to follow my beatboxing, I also teach beatbox. I do pop-up workshops. I do private one-on-one lessons, group lessons online or in person. Andre.Gibson.beatbox on Instagram. I post as much as I can.
Cool. You were recently, I think I can ask about this, you were recently in Montreal for a while doing some stuff. What was that about? What were you up to in Montreal?
In Montreal, I'm on a contract, a part of a show called Celeste. So it's at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in Montreal, and I'm still doing the show. I actually have to go back soon. So I have a section in the show. The show's like a circus show. There's a singer, there's a variety of acts, and in my act, I'm pretending to be a robot, picking up instruments, a radio, and in the whole show, there's no words being said. So we have to communicate our emotions and express ourselves in the show without saying a word. We don't even get to introduce ourselves. And beatbox, you don't need any words.
Fair enough. That's fantastic, man. One last question I have before we let you go is about the preparation process. So I've asked this of almost all the speakers because I'm so keen to give people a look behind the scenes. And I think, like, just in terms of raw numbers, you are the most experienced performer we've ever had on the stage, just given the amount of time that you spend on stage performing. And so, like, what was the preparation process like for you, preparing this talk and so on? Like, what were some highlights, a challenge? What was that like?
I guess the preparation style was like while I'm being like costume fitted and for my show in Montreal, I'm like, okay, let's let me text Bryson. Okay, like, what are we doing?
Bryson is Andre's coach, by the way. Yes.
Or like during my we have to reach 2 hours early, so at those 2 hours, I'm like just trying to go over what I'm trying to do, like while like planning my next performance at whatever place or teaching beatbox.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, I had to think of how do I want to put beatbox in my talk, like the actual act of doing it. And it was challenging at first. I didn't want it to seem separate. And one of the biggest things that I wanted to do, I've watched like a few other beatbox TED Talks, but a lot of them, it seems really separate, the beatbox and the talk. And I didn't want it to feel like a performance. Because for me, I'm beatboxing like every day, everywhere I go. Like literally every second of my life, I'm like beatboxing. So I had to think of a creative way. So I was like, oh, I heard someone ahead of me in class just doing instead of just trying to beatbox first and then just talk about that. I tried to illustrate what I heard, and at moments what I did. I heard tongue clicks, lip oscillation for trombone.
Well, you did a great job, man, and we're so glad you did. Thank you so much. Congratulations once again, Andre. Thanks, man. Thanks. If you want to chat more to Andre, you can find him out in the lobby. You can ask your questions either using language or beatboxing. See how it goes. Okay, so we've reached the part of the show where I get to thank all of the people who help us put it together tonight. So first off, once again, a huge thanks to all of our speakers. Thanks to Tariq, Kelly, Chandra, and Andre. One more round of applause. What a fantastic job. Next up, I want to thank all of our partners, and I hope they'll appear on the screen here. So instead of me just reading all of the names that you could also read, I'm going to just say a little bit about what it means to actually get your name on that screen. Partnering with TEDxToronto is a bit of a radical act. It requires an organization to proclaim that they care about ideas, about building a better world, and about convening a group of people to grow and learn together. As Tariq might say, it's about much more than just selling more mayonnaise. Please join me in a round of applause for all of our partners. And finally, most important, thank you to all of our volunteers. The financial contributions of our partners are significant, but they are, to be totally honest, dwarfed by the in-kind contributions our volunteers make with literally thousands of hours of labor. Many of our volunteers are here tonight. I would ask them now to please stand and receive our applause. And that's the show. If you don't have tickets for tomorrow, you can still watch the live stream. For now, I'll invite all of you out into the lobby for food and drinks and lots of conversation. Watch out for some fun activations. There will be a whiteboard for reflections, lanyards, those are like necklaces, with discussion prompts, and also some sort of secret video project that is so secret even I don't know what it is. Most importantly, talk to the speakers. I can personally attest to their warmth and generosity. They have so much more to share than what you heard on stage. I would encourage you to think of the talks tonight as the beginning of a conversation. That conversation could be a one-off, or it could change your life. The only way to find out is to stick around. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great rest of your night.